Do you think I'm the youngest person in the room? It relates to the talk. Close? No. Next week I'll be 34. Is there anybody younger than me? I didn't hear him. I didn't hear him. So he gets it. We're close. We're close. The topic that you see in the handout, it's the journey into mourning. Next week I'm going to be 34 years old, and I've been a rabbi only officially for just under 2 years. I was ordained in 2017. But I came to work at Shered Zedek Synagogue, where I'm one of the 2 rabbis there, as Michael said. And I do want to thank Michael for this opportunity and the planning committee and all of you for being here. I wasn't at last year's event, and I'm excited to be here, and hopefully the first of many, but maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's see how we do. I started working at the synagogue when I was 19 years old in 2004, and over the time that I worked there as a part-time musician, teacher, I specialized in training kids. You maybe have heard of a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah, a coming-of-age ceremony for young Jewish kids, and I was involved with teaching for that. We incorporated a lot of music, played the piano, started doing weddings in 2011, started doing more and more rabbi-type work. My regular day job, how Michael actually knows me, is I used to be a radio host. I worked for TSN Radio. I used to talk about sports in the morning. An old fan of mine is nodding in the back. We'll do autographs later. It's fine. And then for a lot of different reasons, I decided that the feeling I would get in the work that I was doing at synagogue was what I wanted all the time, and I left the radio. I retired in 2016, studied with a rabbi in New York in an online program, which is kind of cutting edge and new, which is totally my speed and my style, and became, along with a colleague of mine, we were now the 2 rabbis at Shered Zedek. The point is that when I became a rabbi in 2017, people kept asking me, how's your job going to change? And the truth is it wasn't really going to change. A lot of the work that I would continue to do, I had already been doing, with the exception of one big thing, and that's funerals. And the reason why I ask about my age is because one of the hang-ups that I had was you get a phone call that you're going to be meeting with a family to plan a funeral. They've just lost someone dear to them, someone that they loved very much. And in walks a 33-year-old kid and a 31-year-old at the time. And I thought to myself, I think I'm going to be in over my head here. What does a 31-year-old know about what this family is going through? And so that was one of my hang-ups. So to be in front of you in the same sort of situation, this is a parable. It's a metaphor for what I was feeling meeting with families. I don't know how much you know about the Jewish tradition when it comes to death and dying, but we move very, very quickly. The funeral in a Jewish setting will happen within 24 to 48 hours of the death, which I know is quite rare in a lot of other religious circles. And it makes my job as a rabbi tricky because scheduling, you have to maybe drop things, and meet with a family as quickly as possible, plan the funeral and get them ready. There isn't a lot of time to kind of sit around. And I like that. I think it's good. I think sometimes families, I notice, they get stuck in a period of limbo where they're waiting to begin grieving, and often they can't begin until the actual funeral, till the actual burial happens. So we have the funeral within 24 to 48 hours after the death, and then we have a very regimented process. You may have heard of families who do something called sitting Shiva. It's a week-long, ideally a week-long, of the family withdrawing, the next of kin withdrawing from public life, being very private, and people visit them in the home, often of the deceased or one of the other family members' homes, to comfort them. So a complete withdrawal. Then it leads into the rest of the first month, a period we call Shloshim, which is based on the biblical idea that when Aaron and Moses died, the community mourned for 30 days, and then the rest of the first year. So there are stages. And what I learned very quickly is that my job, I feel, is to prepare them for the journey that lies ahead. I used to think to myself, what did other families, what did other rabbis say to them? Like, what were they trying to accomplish? I had this kind of naive notion that you could maybe say the perfect thing, you could say the right sentence, and you could fix everything that was going on for these people, which is, I mean, naive is a polite way of saying that that's very stupid. Because that's not possible, nor is it my role. My role, I feel, is to use the experience of the fact that in a short period of time, I've been around more instances of death and funerals than most people, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Whether you're being coached in sports, or whether you're being taught for your bar mitzvah, or counseled getting ready for a wedding, or in this case for a funeral that I'm talking about, The person doing it just needs to have a little experience to guide you if you feel inexperienced, to let you know what you're in for, to be very practical, upfront, and honest. My father-in-law has this saying. He says, you're an expert if you know just a little bit more than everybody in the room about that topic. You don't need to know everything about the topic. You just need to know a little bit more than everybody else. So when I was starting to meet with families, I realized very quickly that one of the things that I could accomplish to get them the process of eventually healing was to talk about the person that they had lost. And this was what I needed to do. Oftentimes, I'm the one going to be delivering the eulogy. And sometimes, as a rabbi, we have a pretty extensive congregation. Some of those people I know, and some people I do not know. And regardless, I don't know them like their family or their good friends know them. So I need to hear the stories in order to put together a eulogy, so I get the family talking. And this is where my background as a radio host comes in handy, because ultimately I'm trying to get them to help me to tell the story. And if they can talk, if they can tell their own stories about this person, they start to realize the impact this person has had on their lives. And really, at the end of the whole process, at the end of that year, if not sooner, though it usually takes at least a year, if not longer, people begin to realize that they can't change, they can't undo what has been done, but they can develop a perspective and an appreciation for the impact that this person had in their lives. And that I can help facilitate that. I can also help them realize what's ahead. And I do this by drawing on what has happened in my own life. In my own life, my grandfather and I were very, very close. He was a role model of mine. He died when he was 80. I was 23 years old. First real instance of experiencing death. I had an uncle, my mom's brother, who had ALS, who suffered for many years, and then he died. And then my wife's grandmother, with whom she and I became very close, she was Mennonite. She would be very, very pumped up that we were here. That we are here. She would think that that's very cool. So, Oma, we're thinking about you. And she died very, very suddenly. So I have these three experiences, and I try to remember what it was like for me and for my family going through each of these when I look at a family in front of me. And one of the things I think that I remember was I did not know what it was going to be like. And so I try to tell people, I remember something that happened in the couple of days after my wife's grandmother, after Oma passed away. One of the uncles said to me, you know, there's a lot going on. They had the funeral very quickly, actually. And he said, there's a lot going on. I just feel like I need to survive and get through these next couple of days, and then I'll be okay. And I kind of looked at him and I said, I feel badly being the one to have to tell you this, but that's not true at all. It's actually going to get worse before it gets better. Right now, you're very distracted. Right now, there's a lot of people buzzing around. We tell people that getting through Shiva, you think that sometimes you have to get through Shiva and then you'll be okay. There's actually a crash after Shiva. People go back to where they're from if they've been visiting. People stop visiting you. You're lonely a lot of the time. When you have to prepare a funeral in 24 to 48 hours, you don't have time to think about anything. You don't have time to grieve. And then you've got people in your house coming and going all of the time. You really don't have time to grieve. The grieving often doesn't begin sometimes till a week or maybe even longer later. And I think I always try to warn them. I say, in my own life, I don't like being surprised by these kinds of things. I can't tell you how it's going to happen. I can just tell you that it is going to happen. So I give them that little piece, and I try to tell them that it will happen, but that it will slowly get better, in the sense that, again, you can't undo what's been done, but you get more used to a new normal life. My teacher, one of my teachers, was the senior rabbi at our synagogue. His name was Alan Green, Rabbi Green. And he used to talk about what remembering really means. When we remember, when we tell stories, we actually remember. We put the person back together again. The last thing I will share with you is the most difficult funeral I've had to do was a guy who was 1 year older than I was, who I knew. We weren't very close, but I did his sister's wedding, and I saw him there. And then I heard that he had died very tragically in Mexico. This only happened a couple of months ago. And I luckily haven't had too many of these cases. I say all funerals are sad. Everyone should be 93 years old when they go, everyone's family, right? And just go in their sleep, and that would be great. All funerals are sad. Some are tragic, some are not as tragic. That's the distinction. His was, of course, quite tragic. And I was trying to find some kind of writing, something that a rabbi had maybe written that I could share. And the story, and the gist of the story was, I see his hand. Don't look at him. Don't look at him. I warned you. I warned you. The story was this idea of there being this soul in heaven. and I don't think this is necessarily a Jewish story, a soul in heaven, and there's these two groups of angels fighting over what should happen to this soul. One group of angels says the soul is way too pure, way too good. See, he put down his hand. Way too pure, way too good. We can't send this down to earth. The soul is just going to be corrupted by everything that goes on down on earth. It's going to be a waste. The other group of angels says, but that's what we need to do. The soul can cause so much good down on earth. They couldn't decide, so they go before God. And God says, okay, I've listened to both sides, and this is what I've decided to do. I am going to send the soul down to earth because that's what souls are meant to do. And that's what this soul needs to do, to try and improve everything that the first group of angels is concerned about. But I'm not going to leave the soul down there for very long. And after a short period of time, I'm going to bring the soul back up here to heaven. And both groups of angels were okay with this. When I read this story, at first I wasn't too sure what to make of it. But then I realized that, like I said a few minutes ago, at the end of the journey that I can only prepare a family for, in my own life with the 3 people that I've lost, you learn that you put them back together by remembering them. In Judaism, we call the cemetery a house of the living because their memories, their stories endure as a blessing and they guide the way we live our lives. I try not to tell a person immediately after they've lost someone in their family to have this kind of perspective. But I hope that by the end of the journey, if I get them off on the right foot, that is what they come away with. So thank you for your time.